has Venezuela's spiraling standoff just gone to a whole new level. In one corner, fresh mass protests across the country to back the opposition-controlled parliament's launching of the political trial to oust President Nicolas Maduro. In the other, the Supreme Court and the army declaring support for Hugo Chávez's successor. Ahead of the marches, Maduro paying a surprise call on the Pope. It's not quite divine intervention, but could the Vatican succeed where others have failed in breaking Venezuela's impasse? The Church instrumental in ending Cuba's isolation and more recently in brokering talks in Colombia. This, though, is Venezuela, which has become the land of high crime and hyperinflation. How to stop further escalation and get back on track, the nation that sits on the world's largest known oil reserves. Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the showdown in Caracas and elsewhere. With us from the capital of Venezuela, Oswaldo Ramirez, Director of Risk Consultants, ORC. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Always a pleasure to welcome Venezuelan reporter and photojournalist Saray Suarez. Welcome back. Writer Vincent Olive, who is the author of Who Killed Simon Bolivar. And joining us from Lubbock, Texas, Iñaki Sagarzazu, who teaches at Texas Tech University. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for the invitation.
The France 24 debate, where you could join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. Protests across the country. Earlier, when we spoke to our reporter on the scene, Saray Suarez, it seems as though turnout was high. We saw, beginning of September, huge turnout at anti-Maduro protests. It went off mostly peacefully, contrary to what happened back in 2014. How do you feel things are going this Wednesday?
Today, things are very difficult because there was an acceleration of everything. Let's say the last week has been really a very impressively, there is a lot of movements in all the ways, movement from the side of the government, from the side of the opposition, and also in the street, the ambience, the people, the way the people are feeling. And these last weeks with the revocatorio situation, it just explodes and accelerates everything.
So the situation's gotten more tense in 7 weeks. Oswaldo Ramirez, can you feel it in Caracas, that it is tenser than it was just 7 weeks ago?
Well, the first thing we can see is the people have the will to go to the streets and start promoting in some way the restitution of the rights. But right now, the last polls we conducted at Benebarometro, we are seeing that the people, instead of going to the streets and protest against the government, against the power, start to feel fear to be prosecuted, fear to be jailed, or fear to lose the life. Other people is going to go to the lanes for food. Right now, 30% of the population is going or have the will to go to the street. And right now, I think maybe in Venezuela, we are seeing more than 2 million people in the street protesting against Maduro and trying to, the country goes back to the constitutional way. And people are trying right now, the main goal is that the people can defer the conflicts in the electoral urgency, going to election, maybe a recall referendum, or maybe an election, a general election.
Yeah, with some of the options, but certainly it didn't seem that way when the day began at a rally Tuesday. Nicolas Maduro pumped his fist and shouted, "They," meaning the opposition, "won't return. The revolution will continue." This as Parliament reacted to the annulment of its moves to recall the president last week. William Hildebrand has more.
Even before the vote, tensions were high. Pro-government and opposition lawmakers confront each other on the floor of the National Assembly, a struggle that's indicative of Venezuela's political crisis, with clashes between the highest branches of government. Open rebellion by the opposition-led chamber last week. On Sunday, it accused President Nicolas Maduro of a coup d'etat, and Tuesday voted to put him on trial, saying Maduro has violated democracy.
This assembly needs to step away from the crisis, to take a step away from Maduro's autocracy so that democracy wins, so that the Constitution wins, and so that we're not at the mercy of Maduro's wretchedness.
Maduro has seen his popularity plummet. Opponents accuse him of mishandling the economy, silencing dissenters, and consolidating his power. The opposition says he was behind last week's decision by electoral authorities to block a recall referendum that would have allowed removing Maduro from office. But he still has his backers. Maduro has dismissed the trial as a conspiracy, accusing lawmakers of cowering to the foreign interests of the United States.
This assembly has only one objective: to damage Venezuela. We will not allow a parliamentary coup.
The military has delivered a statement saying it stands behind the socialist government and that it is watching the political situation carefully. Any trial against Maduro is expected to be merely symbolic. That's because the government and Supreme Court have already declared Venezuela's Congress illegitimate.
Vincent Olivia, what's your reaction to seeing those images of the military in that report? Is that something that surprises you?
Not really. I mean, the military, we have to understand that the military is already in power. So people looking to the military to solve this crisis have to understand that the military already controls the economic resources, the firepower, and is already in the political power. So I don't know if the military is the people we want to turn to right now. On another hand, on another note, I think it's obvious that the opposition has an electoral majority. The majority of the country is with the opposition. The problem here is how to transform that majority into an applicable or workable political change in the country. By taking away the institutions, which is what the government is trying to do or seems to be trying to do to the opposition, it is forcing the MUD to have its back against the wall and has to figure out how to have all these people that are marching today in Caracas to turn that into something that can be tangible on the political front.
And that's not a given, is what you're saying.
No, I think they have to figure it out very fast. I mean, the MUD is a coalition of parties that had only an electoral pursuit and a political pursuit. They achieved that. When they started finally winning elections, as they did last December, now they're cut off. And they have to figure out how they're going to face this government that they have declared as dictatorial. They don't seem to know very well how to do that, and the factions inside of the MUD have different approaches towards that.
So, Iñaki Sagarzazu, we're hearing from the rest of our panel here. Tension which is rising, rhetoric which is more heated. Where is it all going at this point?
Well, I've just read now that the leader of the Secretary General of the opposition, MUD, called for the initiation of a general strike on Friday. So they promised that they were going to start a round of protests that was going to be different to the traditional approach, where they go, they gather for a while, and then they leave for their houses, and they were going to make it a more long-term effort. They're definitely trying to show force, to show the government that they're a majority, and maybe to show some of the military that might be unhappy with the regime or with the role that the military has been taken, maybe more of the institutionalist military, if there's still any of those around, that the country is not in the side of the government. But in the end, this seems to be like there's a famous research by Guillermo O'Donnell talking about coup poker, right? There's the different sides in dispute right now are showing their cards, or some of their cards, and trying to pressure the others, right? So the opposition right now is trying to show, look, we have the weight of the street, we have the people with us. You better start negotiations, right? We need change. Even though they say publicly that they're not going to do dialogue, I think they would be open to a real dialogue with real consequences in the short term. That's putting pressure on sort of those within the government that prefer a dialogue and prefer a peaceful solution to this whole mess, versus those both inside and in the opposition, right? Inside the government and in the opposition that just want an all-out fight. So I think this is right now, the opposition has been very passive and up until now in their strategies. I think they were waiting for clear signals from the government, which they got with the postponement or cancellation, or whichever way you want to call it, of the recall referendum. And so they're trying to show, well, look, here is us. We are a majority, which the government already knows from the polls, but we are a majority and we're going to get activated, right? And as they can put that pressure on, that will put pressure on the government to negotiate. But that's a risky strategy. Sorry, just one last thing. That's a risky strategy because in the past they've tried this with the general strike in 2003, and that didn't get anywhere, right?
All right, 2003, which of course is 13 years ago, so it's a long...
13 years and without Chavez.
Situation, different environment, and Chavez had money.
Yeah, different environment and, of course, a different leader with Hugo Chavez. I want to pick up on a point there made by Iñaki Zagarzazu, saying how the opposition, despite what they're saying, he thinks, open to dialogue. Of course, this comes in the context of that surprise visit to Rome by President Maduro. Coming back from there, he accentuated the positive.
I call on Venezuela to support the talks, the dialogue for peace, sovereignty, justice, and the development of Venezuela. This feels like a miracle from God. We had to pass through Rome, we made a call, and the Pope answered.
Sarah Suarez, your reaction, can the Vatican succeed where so far, what is it, the former Prime Minister of Spain, Zapatero, has failed, and so have regional leaders?
I personally don't have too much faith in that participation of the Vatican. I think the situation right now is very complex, and both sides are trying to put the strongest of each position on the table. The opposition, as Iñaki was saying, has the street and the support of the people, something that the government lost. And the government still has the guns and has the control of all the institutions. And this inequality on the powers of each side makes the dialogue a very complicated solution.
Yeah, and on that point, the opposition split. The biggest leader, Enrique Capriles, unequivocally against Vatican mediation.
They need to know that we in Venezuela are fighting against Satan. It's the devil we're facing. They're devils, and they don't believe in anything. They have no principles, and they only say they're Christian when it suits them.
Sarah, just how constructive is it to call your opponent Satan?
Well, the use of the languages in Venezuela in general, the opposition or the Chavismo, is something difficult to analyze because both have done a use of the words that is just becoming so easy to say, to call your opponent whatever you want, the devil. I mean, Chavez did it on the United Nations speech, and everybody calls everybody as they want. The language of the political elite in Venezuela has lost all the value.
And do you agree with Iñaki? Do you agree with Iñaki that behind what Capriles says, he is willing to sit down?
I'm not sure. I have the feeling that the last days what I have listened on the political people of the opposition is that they are really tired. You feel on the way they're speaking that they just are losing the patience and they're losing the control of themselves. That is valid for the president of the National Assembly, Enrique Capriles, or they're speaking in a way that you feel really they're losing the patience and they're just not ready to sit down anymore. They just want to get the referendum back and to move the things in another way.
Oswaldo Ramirez, from where you sit in Caracas, do you have the sense that leaders and basically the opposition has reached a tipping point?
Yeah, I think they're at a tipping point, but we have to figure out that the Chavismo has 7 factions of power. Meanwhile, the opposition has 3 factions. Right now, about 4 or 5 factions of the Chavismo wants to negotiate. Just one faction of the opposition wants to negotiate, wants to go to a dialogue. The only thing that the opposition can give in some negotiations table are the streets, are calling that that the people go to the streets and protest. The government, the power, has everything to give. Right now, the military faction that are the I think maybe the most important political actor in Venezuela, that in the meantime they can lose the power, they can lose all the business they have with the government, with the food, with the construction, if they feel that that power is menaced by in some way for the Chavism, by the Maduristas, by the opposition, they go into a coup. Right now, the people, in this moment, the people of the opposition are calling to go to Miraflores on November 3rd, and the people that right now are protesting start to booing the Secretary Showdown, because they're not going to sit down and go back to the houses and wait for another week to go to Miraflores. Right now, maybe you can see the merging of a third faction, or the merging of the chaos, because the leaders cannot conduct all that rage that are in the street right now.
They can't. They're not able to channel. You agree with that, Vincent?
Well, I think that the thing is that the opposition has to have a three-pronged strategy where it doesn't abandon one in favor of the other. The first one, of course, is applying pressure on the streets. The second one would be a legal approach where they try to impeach, according to the Venezuelan constitution, the president. And the third one would be the dialogue kind of situation. I agree totally with my comrade when she said that the opposition has the streets, but the government has the manipulation of the violence. They have the monopoly on the monopoly of the violence. So you have to dialogue on a certain sense. The strategy on the street has the only interest of that is to bait the government into committing a mistake that may maybe tip the military into reacting. There is no political issue of just invading the streets and occupying the streets. That's what you're trying to do on that front. On the legal front, you want to remove President Maduro, appealing to permanent absence is what they're trying to do. And on the dialogue front, you may agree on calling an election. So I think you can do the three without abandoning them. But inside the opposition, of course, they hate each other because they don't agree on this point, because the opposition is a coalition that was electorally conceived.
All right, we're going to pick up on those points. When we come back, you're watching the France 24 today.